market movers. This is The Pulse with Francine Lacqua.
Good morning. Welcome to The Pulse. I'm Anna Edwards in London, in for Francine Lacqua this morning. Senior US and Russian officials are meeting in Saudi Arabia this week to discuss a potential President Trump and President Putin summit to end the war in Ukraine. President Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy will be involved in peace talks with Russia.
We're trying to get a peace with Russia, Ukraine, and we're working very hard on it. It's a war that should have never started.
Do you expect Zelensky to be involved in these conversations? What will his role be?
I do. He will be involved, yes.
So President Trump suggesting that Zelensky will be involved to some degree, the Ukrainian president, but we don't know what that involvement will, of course, look like. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Oliver Crook, who was at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend. Plenty of news flow, plenty of wake-up calls, I suppose, for Europe in some shape or form. What do we know about this Trump-Putin summit that's supposed to take place at the end of this month then, Ollie?
Yeah, I mean, Anna, it's really amazing how sort of rapidly things have developed on the Ukrainian question, really in just the last week. I think it's fair to say that more has happened in the last week than in the last sort of year in terms of actual movement, meaningful movement towards, we don't really know, but some kind of end. We understand that presently what we will have is a high-level U.S. delegation that will be meeting with a high-level Russian delegation within Saudi Arabia. There's question about whether the Ukrainians will be involved in those sort of early chats in order to pave the way and start to lay the ground for that eventual meeting with the presidents of the United States, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump. I mean, really sort of a remarkable turn of events when you think about where we were just a couple of months ago. And now we're talking about these two leaders being in the same room. Of course, the concern for the Europeans is that rather than just being a sort of pragmatic approach, which is, of course, what the U.S. administration is saying that they're doing, and saying that basically the concessions that they have suggested that the Ukrainians are going to have to make are kind of common sense things that everyone sort of knows, but no one has been speaking. That is the sort of their view, that they're being pragmatic. The Europeans, of course, are viewing it as potentially appeasement. And this is going to be kind of the main question for the Europeans as they enter their own summit here on Monday in Paris to try to figure out how they can sort of become influential players in a sort of what feels like the train has already left the station with them not in it.
Right, so that's the big European question, is how can they get a seat at the table, especially if they're expected to be in the leading spot when it comes to securing the peace in Ukraine. So how can Europe get some kind of seat at the table?
Yeah, so listen, and I think that it'll be very interesting to see how they sort of emerge from these talks, because I think for a very long time, the European leaders, policymakers, CEOs, everybody in Europe has been trying to take a sort of overly optimistic view of what the Trump administration means for Europe. And I think that really over the weekend, from all of the news flow we had going into the weekend in Munich, and then that sort of wrecking ball speech by J.D. Vance at the event itself, it sort of is, you know, truly, I think, probably the wake-up call, and that it's not enough to just talk about it. There is time now for action from the Europeans, because the for the Trump administration, they need to see either increased spending, they need to see a commitment to potentially have forces within Ukraine as peacekeeping forces. I mean, we caught up with the Chancellor of Germany over the weekend, Olaf Scholz. Have a listen to what he had to say to us.
I spoke to President Trump very early about how to support Ukraine. My plea is that there should be first the message to Putin that Europe and the United States will continue with their support to Ukraine, because he has to understand that he cannot hope that we stop our support.
The issue for the Europeans is in this sort of new global order that's led by Donald Trump. It's not about multilateralism. It's not about sort of having sort of predetermined conversations ahead of time and coming out as sort of unified G7. It's really unilateralism. It's U.S. policy, and the rest needs to sort of follow. So if the Europeans want a seat at the table, they need to do so in a much more aggressive way. We're going to speak in just a few minutes' time to the deputy head of Zelenskyy's office, who was in those meetings with J.D. Vance in Munich, to get an idea from him, basically, what can the Europeans bring and what does he need from this meeting in Paris?
Oliver, thank you very much. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook then getting us ready for that meeting of European leaders in Paris, and all of the preparations being made for a Russia-US meeting at the end of this month. Now, geopolitics is playing a big role in the European markets today, with defence stocks rallying as the continent's officials work on a major new package to increase military spending. Let's bring in Wei Li, Global Chief Investment Strategist over at BlackRock, for her perspective on markets this morning. Wei Li, very nice to have you with us. So are we getting ready for a higher yield environment then then in Europe? If there's going to need to be more defence spending, yields are higher this morning. Is that what we ready ourselves for?
Well, there are two components for yields. One component is the cash path for the ECB, and currently markets are still pricing for 3 cuts, more than 3 cuts by the ECB this year in response to slower growth in comparison with the US. And then the second component of long-duration European government bonds is term premium, higher term premium, reflecting greater issuance, perhaps. I think it's, as a direction of travel, fair to say that more will be spent on defense, including in Germany, but it doesn't necessarily mean that yields will be a lot higher from here, because there is a huge amount of demand for quality income government bonds in Europe by institutional investors. So for all of those reasons, we actually prefer European government bonds over US government bonds at this juncture.
OK, so you're not overly concerned by a tick up in yield, or you don't think that this tick up in yields that we're seeing this more in Europe, it's not going to be a material part of the story for Europe? You think there's enough demand to accept higher borrowing from European countries?
I think it's a part of a story, but the bigger picture is that there is more room for the ECB to cut compared to the Fed. So because of that little bit of policy divergence and also the huge amount of demand for quality income in Europe by institutional investors, we still think that it's a good exposure to have in portfolios.
OK, and in terms of European stocks then, we've seen European stocks outperform US stocks year to date, but does that look a little fragile based on, I mean, part of that was to do with expectations of, or hopes, I should say, of peace in Ukraine maybe. And whilst that might come, there's also then a lot of nervousness around tariff arrangements for European stocks and a whole host of other policy impacts from the White House. How convinced are you that European stock outperformance continues?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. So far this year, the policy action has been mostly in the US, but the market action has been in Europe, right? You talk about European equities outperform SS5E, Euro Stock 50, more than 12% up on the year compared to S&P 500, just over 3%. So that's very, very notable. But also to your point, a lot of bad news was already in the price coming into this year, especially the relative preference for US over Europe, given the depressed expectation for European growth. You know, if anything were to happen on any of the kind of the drivers, be it peace talk, be it earnings surprising to the upside, be it energy price coming down, we see that happening, be it growth not as bad as expected, or China's stimulus feeding through a little bit more, then there is room for a tactical turnaround in Europe, which is what we have seen so far. But is that going to be sustained? We are not sure. Let's say in terms of flow, what we have seen so far is that there has been flows initially by European investors into European equities. Now even international investors are going into European equities, but just to close underweight, not to go into outright overweight. I think the jury is still out in terms of just how much more momentum there can be. But one thing that we're paying attention to is the fiscal development front. You know, the French budget, clearly a big development, but also Germany potentially loosening fiscal brake. If Europeans were to spend a little bit more, I think that changes the dynamic a little bit, because in terms of what characterized the US exceptionalism, greater fiscal spend has been a part of the piece.
OK, and the other region that's caught our attention, of course, because it's been outperforming the US in some areas, is China, and part of that enthusiasm has been around tech in China. We've seen Goldman Sachs upgrading their views on Chinese equities, saying that DeepSeek is a real reset for expectations as to what Chinese tech can do. Do you have high expectations that Chinese tech can lead more of a recovery in Chinese stocks?
Well, it's actually a bit of a change so far this year in terms of the driver for Chinese stocks. Up until now, we were talking about catalyst coming from stimulus, right? But that really has been less of a catalyst after late summer, more of a backstop for Chinese equities. And now the narrative is changing from waiting for stimulus to new growth drivers, technology, robotics, autonomous driving. And there is a new narrative, and that has been very much much welcoming in terms of international investors. You look at Hang Seng Tech so far this year, more than 23% up on the year, catalyzed by the DeepSeek development. So we do have the view, we have a small overweight in Chinese equities over the tactical horizon. We do think that momentum can go as this kind of the narrative shifts in a more positive way. But over the longer term, though, the structural headwind facing Chinese economy, including aging population, overhang property sector, that hasn't gone away. So tactical, modest overweight, but over the long term, less positive.
OK, and just to finish off, Wei Li, what about the M&A theme? Is that something that you see as investable right now? When President Trump was elected, there was some excitement that maybe reduced regulation in some sectors, notably the banking sector, might lead to more M&A. We're seeing M&A being attempted by European banks to some degree, but there's so much uncertainty about the wider President Trump agenda that perhaps that weighs on executives' willingness to enter into big transactions. So how do you see the M&A landscape?
Well, what we have seen so far is animal spirit energizing overall market in the U.S., including the M&A landscape. But because of the huge amount of uncertainty in terms of policy making, which is something that we build out a lot in our 2025 outlook, executives are still somewhat hesitant to really go big, right? So one thing I would say is that I think animal spirit can carry sentiment a little bit further, which is also why we see kind of things moving around. Maybe this is also why for private equity sector there could be a better kind of outlook for companies to exit. But more broadly, it's hard to say that this is definitely kind of moving full steam ahead, given the huge amount of policy uncertainty that we face right now.
OK, Wei Li, thank you very much. Global Chief Investment Strategist at BlackRock, Wei Li. Coming up on the programme, stay with us. I mentioned consolidation within the Italian banking sector. We are going to have an important conversation about that shortly. We will be having an interview with the Banco BPM CEO, Giuseppe Castagna, joins us shortly. This is Bloomberg.
I think on BPM shareholders, we need to do our work and show the value that we will bring, the differential value that we will bring, and why switching from BPM stock into ours can bring them even more value. I'm quite confident. We've had a long-dated partnership with Crédit Agricole in custody, in asset management, in other areas. They know us, so I'm quite confident eventually they will be positive to a transaction.
That was UniCredit CEO, of course, Andrea Orcel, speaking to Bloomberg about his company's takeover offer for Banco BPM. Over the past 30 minutes, UniCredit has said it may retract its takeover offer for rival Banco BPM if the latter gets shareholder approval to tweak its own acquisition effort for the asset management firm Anima. These are the share prices as they stand right now. Banco BPM up 1% this morning, UniCredit up by 2.5%, both while the wider sector lifted by higher yields in Europe. I'm pleased to say we're joined now by Giuseppe Castagna, the CEO of Banco BPM. Thank you so much, Giuseppe, for coming to speak to us. Can I start with your response to the latest news flow? We've just heard from UniCredit in the last half hour. They say they may terminate their bid for your business if you raise your offer for Anima. Do you have anything to say in response to these latest news lines from UniCredit?
Good morning, Anna. Of course, they just came. I think they are very dangerous allegation. I think he's trying to influence the shareholder vote into the assembly we will hold in order for my shareholder to vote in favor of the Anima acquisition that, as we showed, is putting our bank in a very solid, strong position, not only in capital, but also in profitability revenues in the future years. Of course, the guy is trying to play a game. He's very good at that. He wants to depress our stock in favor of his stock, but we will respond also legally at this kind of allegation. But let me just say, in terms of Common Equity Tier 1, it's very funny that we have, you know, that common equity is important compared to the P2R, so the regulatory number that the ECB give to each bank to respect. And of course, being UniCredit systemic, bank, they have to have 100 basis points more than we need. So his alleged 13% end of his target would mean 12% for us. So because we say that we had 13, we are very much higher than UniCredit ambition.
Giuseppe, would you describe what UniCredit is doing, the tactics they're using right now, would you describe them as poison pill tactics?
But I think, again, we understood also from the conversation we had last week in London, there is a lot of hinting, fake news about retiring from the offer if we go ahead with the Anima offer. But, you know, it's so crucial for us. We have all the capital needed. With Anima, we will complete our product factory completion in order to have a bank which is not yet depending on interest rate volatility, but from a strong commission revenues. And this is the only answer that we can give to whatever want to buy our bank, not paying the right price.
OK, is it only about the price, Giuseppe? Is it only about the price and exposure to Russia? If the price is better and there is no exposure to Russia, would the answer be more likely to be yes?
No, this comes back to the clarity, the transparency that we are used to have always. We showed in our business plan that we started 8 years ago with the merger Banco BPM. It was a very difficult one. Many times we were not believed by shareholders that we could have reached very strong results without asking any time for capital issue, for share issue from our shareholders. So this has been done with our strength, with the business model very convincing, 1,000 total return, shareholder total return, 1,000% in the last 5 years. No need to comment that our strategy is based on fact, on our story, our credibility, and a very feasible business plan, which didn't want to make more juicy after UniCredit proposal, because it was already very good with 2024 results.
What feedback have you had
Russia,
on that plan and on your intention? Sorry, Giuseppe, I was just going to say, what feedback have you had on the plan from investors that you met in London? I know you've just been talking to investors in London.
Yeah, again, also in London, we were told that he's trying to make scary the shareholder that we cannot have enough capital. But again, when we say something, we have been always used to respect what we say. I can ensure our shareholder we will have enough capital to bring the bank to the position we anticipated with our business plan. But also this allegation that we are not going to get the Danish compromise is completely fake news. We are only saying that because we want to accelerate our process, we want to not depend on whatever will decide the ECB, because we are so sure that EBA and ECB are, there is no other possible things that approve the current situation, which already include the Danish compromise. We want to be transparent. We said, whatever happens, in whatever scenario, we will be able to give 6 billion of shareholder remuneration and keep, in any case, 13% as our threshold. But our base case is to give 7 billion to our shareholder with 14% of common equity tier 1 threshold.
So just so I'm clear, Giuseppe, you're saying that you will do this regardless of whether you get this so-called Danish compromise agreed around the Anima deal. Is that what you're saying?
It's not exactly that. What I'm saying that we will ask our general shareholder meeting to give back to the board what the board is deprived from the decision because of the passivity rule that UniCredit imposed on us with basically a non-correct offer at a discount, basically. So now we want to say to the General Assembly, give us the flexibility to use the potential refuse of waiting for the Danish compromise to be approved in order to accelerate our roadmap toward having a complete bank in terms of product faculty offer, for which Anima is the last point that we have to complete. We don't want to give the advantage to wait for regulatory when we are so sure that this would be the outcome.
So you're so sure that you will get that anyway. Let me ask you about your biggest shareholder, Crédit Agricole. Giuseppe, what conversations have you had? What indications have you had from Crédit Agricole on their views on the UniCredit offer for your business?
No, we are, Crédit Agricole, I think, is an happy shareholder. They made the first 10% investment, investing 300 million in our bank. Now that 10% is worth 1.3 billion. They have two factories with us, PSC Bank Assurance and Consumer Finance, having fantastic results. So I'm sure they are very happy of our stake, and as far as I know them, they will be happy to support our bank. But this, of course, is something for them to decide.
It is something for them to decide, but I think your chairman has been saying that you're going to Paris on a roadshow. So will you be talking about this with Crédit Agricole soon?
We will talk to all our shareholders, the financial investor, private equity, and of course also our industrial shareholder, with which of course we have an arm's-length relationship, informing them of whatever we inform the other shareholder in the market.
And what's the latest feedback you have from the Italian government? I think Crédit Agricole might be waiting to hear what the Italian government thinks of UniCredit's offer. What is the Italian government saying to you?
No, the Italian government is playing a level playing field. I think they are working, trying, as is a duty for the government, to ensure that whatever will be the output of this game of OPS, OPA, and so on, there will be a strong banking sector in Italy helping to grow in terms of GDP, and we know that SMEs in Italy is the boost for growing in GDP. A bank like ours, of course, is a sort of a win bet if we want to continue to support SME.
Giuseppe, thank you so much. Giuseppe Castagna, Chief Executive Officer, CEO of Banco BPM. We thank you very much for joining us. Coming up, our exclusive interview with the French Minister Delegate for European Affairs. That's coming up. We'll discuss the emergency summit on Ukraine, on peace in Ukraine, that's taking place in Paris. European leaders gathering to try and assert their views on this process. This is Bloomberg. Good morning and welcome to The Pulse. I'm Anna Edwards in London, in for Francine Lacqua this morning. Here are your top stories. President Trump says Ukraine's president will be involved in peace talks with Russia as European leaders hold an emergency summit on security and support for Kyiv. European bond yields and defence stocks rise as Brussels plans a major new package to boost defence spending. Plus, China's president meets with business leaders, including Alibaba's Jack Ma, in a show of support for the country's private sector. Welcome back to the programme, everybody. Just approaching 9:30 here in London. Now, Bloomberg understands Emmanuel Macron has invited European leaders to meet in Paris today for urgent talks about Ukraine. The meeting is seen as an effort to persuade President Donald Trump, not to rush into peace negotiations with Russia. For more, I'm pleased to say I'm joined exclusively by Benjamin Haddad, the French Minister Delegate for European Affairs. Minister Haddad, thank you very much for being with us. I wonder if you could help us set our expectations for what will be achieved in Paris. We've been told by Annalisa Baerbock that a large package of a scale we've never seen before is expected to come. What are you expecting to come out of this Paris conversation?
Hi, thanks for having me. This is a turning point for European security. What's happening in Ukraine is paramount not only to Ukrainian freedom and sovereignty, but also to the security of all Europeans. And this is why President Macron decided to gather leaders of European countries today to discuss how we can continue to help Ukrainians and put them in the best possible position for a negotiation, how we can ensure then that we have a ceasefire that's sustainable, that's lasting for a just peace, that allows Ukraine to continue to be a free country anchored to Europe, and how also we can take stock of what has happened, what has been said in the last few days, and step up considerably our capabilities at the European level, because this is also a moment for Europeans to own their security, to take responsibility. After all, this is what's been asked of American leaders, Democrats like Republicans in the last decade. And so this is also a moment for us to hear this and to step up.
So, Minister, we were told by Annalena Baerbock that, similar to the Eurozone crisis or the Corona crisis, a financial package is going to be put in place by Europe. Is that the scale of expectation that we should have here?
No, during the COVID crisis, we all rightly considered that we were facing an existential crisis for Europe. And we managed to come together and to overcome long-standing taboos and invest massively in the recovery of our economies with the next generation EU package, the common debt. I would argue that we're faced with a similar existential moment, that what happens in Ukraine is of existential importance to the future of Europe, to the future of European security. So yes, this is a moment also to think about how we can fund stepping up on our security. There are a few options on the table when you think about the discussions in the coming days and weeks. Of course, there's the question of defense Eurobonds. This is something that had been proposed at the time by Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, who's now the High Representative of the European Union. You have also the European Stability Mechanism, where you have potential funds that could be redirected towards defense. We also need to all continue to step up our effort at the national level. If you take France, over the 2 terms of the Macron presidency, we have doubled our national defense budget, and we continue to increase it. But in the face of this emergency, I think it is time to take historic decisions. And indeed, the question of Eurobonds, for instance, is one of the mechanisms that we should be talking about, I think, in the in the coming days.
Do you expect that you'll get German agreement for something like Eurobonds to pay for defence? The German position Olaf Scholz gave us over the weekend seems to suggest he wants more of this, more flexibility on national budgets to pay for this.
I think actually the Chancellor is right to mention this option as well. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, you saw in Munich, mentioned the possibility of giving flexibility when it came to deficit rules to exclude some of the defense spending, especially investment R&D, from EU deficit rules. It's one of the flexibilities that we would support. It's been also a long-standing issue raised by the Italian government. Once again, it's time to be creative. It's time to be innovative, because the world is watching, our security is at stake, and we need to step up.
Yes, need to step up. And you say get creative. I mean, there's an expectation perhaps that a lot of this money gets spent on European defence companies. Are you going to be mindful of signalling a willingness to buy American defence equipment by way of convincing President Trump that Europe is ready to step up and pay its way?
You know, if we think about the need for Europeans to be able to own their security, of course, it will have to go through an effort in stepping up our European defense industry. Why? First, because you also need to signal that this is trickling down in terms of jobs and investment. This is sustainable in the long run, and to give visibility also to our defense industries, to our companies, that they can step up capacity and ramp up production. I think it's also really important in terms of technology. You know, when you think about owning the tech, when you think about owning the use of that technology. Let's take the recent example of Ukraine. When you deliver long-range missiles to Ukraine, if you have even a small part of components that have been built by the United States, there's still control of use by the United States, and this has been at the heart of the debates that we've had over the possibility for Ukrainians to use deep strikes, you know, against Russian targets, even though Europeans were in favor of this. So the question of the control of use and the control of the technology will be also critical if we want Europeans to be able to step up, if we want them to take more responsibility in their defense. And this is also something that we'll have to convey to our friends across the Atlantic.
Minister, thank you very much. Benjamin Haddad, the French Minister Delegate for European Affairs, joining us for an exclusive interview for Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. Now, President Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy will be involved in peace talks with Russia. Let's bring in to the conversation Bloomberg's Oliver Crook in Berlin, who has a guest with him. Oliver.
Yeah, that's right, Anna. I mean, it's been a hugely consequential week from Ukraine. I think it's fair to say that more has happened in the last week in terms of advancing what the future of this conflict looks like than probably in the last year. And that's all down to Donald Trump taking that call with Vladimir Putin and really sort of setting the stage now for meetings at the very highest level between the United States and Russia in Saudi Arabia. So we're very pleased now to be joined by Ihor Brusylo, who is the deputy head of Ukraine's president's office. He just got off the plane to basically where he spent the weekend in Munich with a bunch of high-level meetings, including obviously with the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, but also with the vice president of the United States, J.D. Vance. Thank you so much for joining us today at this really crucial moment for Ukraine. You had a meeting with the vice president of the United States. What did you leave that meeting with? What was your impression?
Oh, thank you so much indeed for having me today here. Well, indeed, in Munich, the president of Ukraine met with the vice president, and that was a very important meeting in terms of establishing an interpersonal connection and relations, because, you know, as the situation develops, you need to get more information from the in-depth. So that was a meeting to touch base on the main topics in Ukraine and U.S. relations, and it was very important in terms of getting also General Kellogg to chart his trip to Ukraine to get more information about how things stand and where we are and what America can do and what can be done just to bring everyone to the table of negotiation, the main stakeholders, so that no one is left out.
Do you feel that J.D. Vance was supportive of the Ukrainian position? Did you leave that meeting feeling optimistic?
Well, we have led the meeting absolutely optimistic, and it takes time, you know, just to synchronize our positions. And the most important thing is that the meeting happened. In the nearest time, there will be the continuation. So we are building on it. And yes, we can say that now United States is involved deeply in the process and are looking forward. The main thing for President Trump, as was said, to ensure the peace, that it is reliable and stable, so that this war will not recur in any form, in any type, just in 1 year or in 2 years after its completion now.
And I'd like to get your perspective on Trump's approach, engaging directly with Vladimir Putin. I'd like to get an understanding of, obviously, he's setting up this meeting potentially in Saudi Arabia. Will Ukraine be a participant in a high-level meeting in Saudi Arabia with the Russians?
Look, our side and our country was not invited to the meeting, so there will be no representative from what I know as of today at this meeting. And it makes the situation, I would say, dangerous because, firstly, and it's obvious, it stands to reason to expect that the talks should be held first with Ukraine to hear our position, to hear what we have to say, and then so the main thing is to avoid these backdoor channels, you know, this back dealing. It doesn't help the situation, and you have to understand the mind of the people who you're meeting with before you can proceed. That's important.
Could you imagine a scenario in which some of these sort of requirements are met and Zelensky could meet with Trump and Putin later this month?
Well, everything is possible now. You know, we'll leave at the speed that is just within our reach sometimes. And if this meeting is to take place, it should be properly arranged, and every party should get the notice well in advance where this meeting is to take place and what is the agenda of this meeting, so that we can move forward on that. So it doesn't work, you know, that you say, well, tomorrow we meet in some place and everyone will go there. It's not a fair approach. I suppose, and I believe that preparatory work is to be done just before everyone gets in.
And obviously, Trump's approach has concerned the Ukrainians. It has also concerned the Europeans, who have now set an emergency meeting to be held in Paris with a number of European leaders. Going into that meeting, we have heard a lot about how much of a wake-up call Trump is for Europe. What do you need concretely from European leaders in those meetings? What can they assure Ukraine for in order to be actually supportive in this process and start to join their voice to this conversation?
Absolutely. As President Zelensky mentioned in his speech during the Munich Security Conference, the time has come also for Europe to wake up and to take their fair share of responsibility. Why? Because it's on the continent. The situation that is developing is in Europe. Ukraine will be part of Europe one day. And so security guarantees that must be robust could potentially be ensured also by European countries. The best possible way and the best possible option is to think about the idea of President Zelensky to set up the armed forces of Europe, because primarily, this is in the interest of all European nations, just to ensure the secure peace for themselves as well. Because if it doesn't stop here in Ukraine, it will go forward, and every European country will have the reverberations of this war. Just I wouldn't wish anyone to feel what it is, but the things look like that. So Europe it's time for Europe to become self-sufficient in terms of defense and security, and to look at their defense strategy in a little bit different angle, and to also to ramp up the high-tech and advanced military equipment. The time has come. It should be done, and there is no time to devise.
And thinking more concretely, would one of those things be from commitments from European nations to, for example, peacekeeping troops in Ukraine after a ceasefire? We've heard from the United Kingdom. Is that something that would make a substantial difference for you?
Well, a ceasefire is not the word to use here. It should be the end of war, because ceasefire means that it can last just for a couple of days and then restart again. And then everybody say, but we did our job, and there was the ceasefire, maybe for one day or two, but it was, and that's it. No, the ceasefire is not the mode in which we are going to accept the end of the war. It's not fair. So security guarantees must be robust. And this is the position of President Trump, that he said this peace should be ensured through force.
And then another question for you. There was also high-level meetings over the weekend in Munich with also the foreign minister of China. What role should China be playing in this conversation? Do you welcome China as part of these sort of discussions here in ending the war?
China can be a strong power behind all this situation, and could be a good mediator also to get involved if there will be a wish on part of the Chinese leadership, which we respect as well. And the situation can be that they can look at how they can take part in the resolution.
And then just a final question for you. Did you have a meeting with Friedrich Merz? Did you get a sort of idea of what a Chancellor Merz, in terms of Germany, that policy would look like in terms of its support to Ukraine?
I believe that the support of Germany will not change at all. And considering all the potential threats that are overlooking or looming over Europe, he will use also his strong position. The voice of Europe should be heard as well. But first and foremost, for us, the most important thing is for President Trump to be a deal maker in this situation and to be a peacemaker, because potential of the United States is equal to none today, but everyone have to play their fair share. So this is together. If you're asking who should be at the negotiating table, I will say this is the United States of America, Europe, Ukraine, and Russia.
Great. Well, Ihor Brusylo, thank you so much, the deputy head of the Ukrainian President's Office. Thank you so much from the United Arab Emirates, and I'll hand it back to you, Anna, in London.
Thank you.
Oliver, thank you very much. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook in Berlin, bringing us that conversation with the deputy head of the Ukraine President's Office. Coming up on this programme, we get the latest on the German election against the backdrop of Europe scrambling to respond to Donald Trump's plans, scrambling to respond to all that we heard in Munich over the weekend. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to The Pulse. Now, Germany's election campaign flared into life yesterday when the four main candidates clashed on live television, exchanging barbs a week before the ballot. Let's go to Berlin and to speak to Bloomberg's Chad Thomas, who, of course, is tracking all of these developments across Germany and across the wider continent as well. Chad, let's start with the domestic election story, clearly being very influenced by global factors. What was the key takeaway, really, from that debate last night? The first time, I think, we've seen four leaders, including the AfD, on stage debating in the run-up to this election.
Hi, Anna. Well, it was the first time we had all four of these leaders, the AfD, the Social Democrats, the Christian Democrats, and the Greens, on stage. And it shows basically also how split German politics is, that you have four leaders who have qualified for the debate. The three leaders attacked the AfD leader during this debate, Alice Weidel, basically calling her and her party a Nazi for some of the comments that they've made in recent weeks and months. And so it'll be interesting to see how this continues to play out. But Friedrich Merz, who, of course, a couple of weeks ago tried to push this vote through the Bundestag and had some backing from the AfD. He was very clear again last night. I think he wanted to make this clear to voters that he will not go into a coalition with the AfD. That is what he was saying after the election. Of course, we're just 6 days away from that election, which is this coming Sunday.
Yes, Chad, and of course the events of Munich over the weekend, the things we heard from J.D. Vance and the comments around the broader Ukraine security situation, all of that very much playing into the German election, I'm sure. Meanwhile, European leaders meet in Paris to talk about what security guarantee they can offer for Ukraine. What will Germany's message, do you think, be there? Will they be standing firm against joint debt issuance?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, Anna. We had a taste of what those discussions will look like when we were talking. We had an interview with Annalena Baerbock. She's the German foreign minister, who hinted that Europe is working on putting together a big package around defense that will be, she said, bigger than anything you've ever seen. She wouldn't give us any more details on that, but that is something that is going to be discussed at this meeting tonight. Germany will be, of course, very important if they actually do come up with some kind of proposal. They did say, though, that they're not actually going to reveal in any detail what they're looking at until after the German election, but kind of interesting that the foreign minister told us that on the record already at the Munich Security Conference. I think she probably said that because of the comments, of course, from J.D. Vance, where he was really taking Europeans to task, and she felt she needed to say something in terms of a strong response.
Chad, thank you very much. Bloomberg's Chad Thomas with the latest from Germany and how it fits into the wider European political landscape. Coming up on the programme then, we'll go from Europe to China. The Chinese President Xi Jinping met with prominent tech entrepreneurs, including Alibaba's Jack Ma. More on this next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the programme. Let's pivot to the Chinese tech story. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with prominent entrepreneurs, including Alibaba's Jack Ma. The meeting signals Beijing's endorsement of the private sector amidst escalating trade tensions with the United States. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie, who tracks the tech sector and all things Chinese as well. So that brings together both of these beats very nicely. What's the significance of this meeting then, Tom? Because, I mean, Jack Ma is somebody that hasn't been seen for a while, or wasn't.
It is the symbolism of Jack Ma being brought back into the fold after being pushed out into the cold towards the end of 2020 when he gave this kind of very fiery speech at a summit in Shanghai. And then after that, you saw the ending of the Ant Financial IPO that would have been the biggest IPO on record at that point. And then, of course, you got the regulatory crackdown on the technology sector. It's the symbolism that Jack Ma has been brought back into the fold, along with... He was sitting there along with other CEOs. Ren Zhengfei, of course, he's never been pushed out into the cold. Ren Zhengfei, the head and the founder of Huawei, but also company executives from companies like Xiaomi that make smartphones, but also cars as well. It was a reminder that this is a leadership in Beijing that now recognises that if they want to get growth, they have to get the private sector to play a role. The private sector accounts for the majority of the growth in China, and that they have to get the technology sector working again. And that when it comes to new innovations around AI, China is well placed to compete, and therefore the Chinese government should be supporting these companies.
And there's a lot of expectation that we might get some fiscal stimulus come the spring in China. And so what do we expect the outcome of this meeting to be?
Well, that remains the key question. What will be the material outcome on the back of the symbolism? The symbolism is one thing. We've seen, of course, rip-roaring gains year to date for those Chinese tech stocks, largely as a result of that AI development. What materially will Xi Jinping and the leadership in China do to support that sector going forward is something we need to watch for.
OK, Tom, thank you very much. Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie with us to talk about Chinese tech and the way it plays into the wider narrative in China. Up next, Bloomberg Markets' Tom McKenzie will be back to take you through the next couple of hours of programming. No doubt he'll be tracking these European stocks as they make gains this morning. We're up by 0.4% on the stock 600. Some of the best gains coming through in Germany, up by 0.8%. Banks are strong, insurance strong, industrial goods and services strong, which means the defence sector is on the rise. And that's part of what's driving Germany a little bit higher this morning. There's a lot of geopolitics to digest. More on that in the next hours ahead. This is Bloomberg.